Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Reesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Sasha Willis, the boss lady behind Strategy by Sasha and owner of Boundless Audio Podcast Network. Please enjoy Sasha Willis. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I am here with Sasha Willis, boss lady behind Strategy by Sasha, and the owner of Boundless Audio Podcast Network. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Well, I am so excited for you to join me for this episode to talk about creativity and all of the things that you do. It sounds like you have your hands in so many things and I'm so curious to hear what they all are and how you balance all of them. But before we dive into that, why don't you share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Sasha Willis, and I am a business strategist. I am a host of a podcast network. In my business strategy business, I help creative women essentially get clarity, confidence, and build consistency in their business so that way they can grow their businesses. As a creative person myself and someone who grew up loving all types of artistic endeavors, I like to think of myself as the unique person who also went to business school. So most creatives are really good at their craft, but not so good at business. And so that's where I come in and kind of help them with that. And then my podcast network, like you mentioned, Boundless Audio, we started that in April of last year, 2020. And it's just a collective of 21 shows now. And the goal of the network is to amplify the voices of women, primarily women of color, those in the LGBTQ plus community, so that our stories can be heard and pull our download numbers together, because that's what helps with sponsorship. So they can also hopefully get paid for doing their podcasting. So that's kind of what I do. I'm also a mom and I'm married. So
I love all of it. That's so fantastic. And you are 100% correct about creatives not necessarily understanding the business world.
yes.
So we need people like you to help, who straddle both of those worlds for sure. And I'm so curious, kind of what led you to that world of finance and world of creativity? Like, how did you come to that?
So I went to college. I have my bachelor's in business management, and then I have a master's in HR. And just from growing up where I live, both of my parents were in the military. I grew up right outside the DC area. So pretty much everyone here has a government job. And it's a secure job. And so I essentially knew that I wanted to go work for the government somewhere. It was going to be easy. I would have it for a long time. I'd get to retire. I have good benefits. And so that's kind of why I went into the business route. I mean, before I went to college, I wanted to do like psychology. I wanted to be like a history major, but I was like, be practical. And so I just went for a business degree.
Okay. Nice. And where does the creativity show up for you in all of that?
Well, I've always had a creative, I guess, mind. Growing up, my mom would literally like sit me in front of Bob Ross and with paper and watercolors and would be like, paint this. And, I would just have a field day. I've always loved to draw. I'm really big into interior design. So when I was in middle school, I even thought about going to school for interior design. Mm-hmm. And we would go look at model homes together and just look at like how things were decorated and stuff like that. And so I've always been into that type of world. I mean, even before I transitioned my business into strategy, I originally started doing scrapbooks for other people.
Oh, fun.
And then that transitioned into me doing stationery. So I did wedding stationery primarily. So before I was a strategist. My business was in the creative field.
Yeah.
I did wedding strategy. I mean, wedding stationery, and I did event styling, which is like, the really cute dessert tables and things like that,
Mhm.
because I love a themed party. And to this day, I still will go all out for a good theme. I stopped doing that when I got pregnant with my son, and I just didn't have the time to juggle dealing with couples and they need their stationery like yesterday and stuff like that. So I transitioned into doing strategy after that.
Smart transition for sure. I love all of the pieces and all of the things that got you to where you are today.
Yeah.
Now, what does it mean to you to be creative?
I mean, creativity for me it's my outlet in seeing the world. I love anything with color. So I'm Puerto Rican, and so I say it's just in my blood to love color. Like I forget the name of the movie, but my mother-in-law thinks this is me to a T. It's about a couple and they meet and then they immediately get married. They buy a house and he's the white guy, she's Spanish. He leaves to go to work for the day. His house is all white. She comes home or he comes home. His house, every room is painted a different color by the time he gets home. And that's me. Like color for me is like it's part of my culture. It's what I love seeing the beauty in things.
Yeah.
And so creativity is just a way to put that into my own life. So like now I in my personal life, I do it more with how I decorate and
Mhm.
how like the paintings I like to see and stuff like that. But I also am really big into Harry Potter. So I make Harry Potter Lego sets because like that's my form of like creative outlets of just building fun things. And so that's kind of creativity for me is just like infusing life with color. Like that's
Oh,
how I picture it.
I love that. And I love that story of going from the White House to every room painted different color. That would be me as well.
I literally did that with my first house. I had a painting party and I invited all of my friends over. And even now in our house now, like every single room was painted a different color. And because it just feels warm and inviting. And, I just love how color makes people feel. So,
I think we forget how impactful color can be in our lives. So,
yeah, I mean, it just creates a lot of emotions and can be
oh,
calming or exciting or, and vibrant. And I do think it's a big part of my culture though, because
yeah.
in Puerto Rico, especially in Old San Juan, like all of the buildings are painted different colors. They're all bright colors. And so
Mhm.
I've always just been drawn to stuff like that.
Nice. And so wonderful to be able to express that where you live and share that with people who come and visit your home. Like,
Yeah.
how fantastic is that? Now, you were sharing a little bit about being a strategist and kind of working with couples in the wedding stationery world that you were in and then transitioning. I imagine you have come up against some creative challenges working in those industries. And what are some of the challenges that you have come up against? And then how do you face these creative challenges?
Yeah. I mean, when I was doing wedding stationery, that was a challenge in and of itself because people don't understand the value that goes into a lot of creative businesses and people's
Yeah.
endeavors like that. Like you just think about, oh, it's a piece of paper, it shouldn't cost that much, people are just going to throw it away. And it's like, no, like it actually does. Like the paper itself doesn't cost a lot, but for what you envision, that's the first impression that people are getting of your wedding. Like it can be this beautiful thing. And if it's beautiful enough, people actually don't throw it away. Like it goes on like a fireplace mantle and things like that. And so the general just devaluing of people's art crafts, like it's the
Mhm.
same I see with some of my clients who do graphic design and
Mhm.
they build websites or they're creating logos, and we see it on the consumer side is, oh, they do it so fast, like they drew a piece of paper and now my logo is done. It's like, yeah, but they went to school for 10 years to be able to do that as fast as they do. And when I was doing wedding stationery, I had to learn how to use programs to design the stationery and set it up so that it could be printed the right way. And so it was a lot, sometimes a mismatch between what people wanted, and I use that in quotes, versus what they wanted to spend.
Mhm.
But then it was also trying to it's hard for people who aren't creative sometimes to express what they want from something that's being done creativity. Like, so it, I want an invitation that feels like florally. Like, well, what does that mean? So
What does that look like?
so trying to convey, and then on the flip side, even for me, like I could say, oh, we can make your invitation feel like this and it'll look like this. And I can very easily picture it in my head. But then trying to get someone who doesn't think like that and who it's harder for them to picture things in their head, that's always been a challenge. So
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like so much education, so much interpretation, and working with like almost a disconnection of, if you're someone who can really visualize something and other people can't,
yeah,
that's really hard to bridge that
yeah, it
gap.
and I've always, I think when you are creative, it's easy for me and other creative people that I know, like when I want to decorate in my house, I can very easily like picture what the room's going to look like, what exactly I want to do, what the color is going to be and the furniture and everything. And I thought that everybody could do that.
Right.
But apparently they can't. So
Yeah. Surprising. And it's a gift, I guess. Not everyone is that visual or has that imagination, but I love that we can like flex that skill or that part
yeah,
of creativity and enhance that. So if that's something you wanted to be better at, you can practice it and
yeah,
can
yeah.
learn.
I think creativity in general, some people are naturally creative, but I do think it's a skill that also can be like learned to a certain extent and like fine tuned. So you don't necessarily like have to be born creative, but it helps if you're going into that field.
Sure. And I think it is that skill. Like it's like a muscle. Like if you
Yeah,
want more of it, you got to keep using it to have more. That like
exactly.
Maya
Yep.
Angelou has that quote, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have.
Yep.
And so I think you're kind of talking to that too, of like, you got to keep using it to have it available to you. Yeah. And I love hearing just like, because I think you're right. People forget there is that disconnect of like when you're providing a service for someone or a product that other people have input in. And then as the person creating it, how to take into consideration what they want and still keep it true to your style
Yeah.
and the cost and all of those pieces. Having that background in finance, do you feel that you had more opportunity, like a better handle on how to navigate that than maybe other creative people doing wedding stationery?
I think having the background enabled me to set up my business in a way so that I wasn't stressed out about the back end of my business. So all of the things that come with running a business, I didn't have to worry about that as much. Like I knew how to set up like my onboarding and my workflows so that stuff
Yeah.
runs seamlessly and I can do my own bookkeeping. And whereas most creatives are like they're stressed about whatever client they're working with and like the fact that they have to do their bookkeeping and their onboarding sucks for their clients right now because they haven't been able to tackle that. I was just able to focus on like the problem client that I had or trying to make sure that, I can give all of that energy to my client. So I think that's kind of where having both of those skill sets has helped me because it allowed me to really put solid foundations in every level of my businesses when I pivoted and what they changed into. I was able to still have a foundation of like, okay, I know I set up the website and now I have my email funnel and now I can do like my social media marketing and my content scheduling. Like I think in that way, and I'm very type A organized. So I'm able to like do that, but then also like I can make my website look pretty and still know that it's going to convert people and it's still a functional website, not just a pretty website. So
Yeah.
I think kind of that's where all that comes in.
Nice. For people who may not have that background, what are some of like the tips that you might recommend for someone who is trying to do both and doesn't have that background in the finance.
Yeah, I think the biggest tip that I always give people, if you are starting any sort of creative business, is to really get clear on one, who you're targeting, but also what your pricing is going to be. Because I think as creative individuals, we have a tendency to price ourselves lower because something comes naturally and easy to us. We don't think that other people will find the value in it. We don't think that it should be, charged as much. But then if you break it down into what you are actually getting paid for the hours you're spending doing something, it's like dollars, or sometimes just like pennies on the dollar, because you don't think like that. You're like, oh, I bought, a canvas for $200 and I'll sell it to you with my art for $250. And it's like, well, maybe it took you like 8 hours to make that artwork, and you had to go to school to learn how to paint like that, and, to visualize things like that. And so like getting pricing right, I think, and knowing who you're talking to is, I think, one of the first things you should do when setting up a creative business. And remembering that you are not necessarily your target audience, because just because you won't pay a certain amount of money for something that you create doesn't mean that there aren't people who won't pay that or will pay that.
Right.
We tend to think like, oh, my family and friends aren't going to pay like $200 for something, like I can't charge that. And it's like, there are people who spend at every price level.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of being confident with your pricing and showing that you can do that, like why you're valuable at that.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I think that's such a great reminder and such a great tip to pay attention to those pieces, because I think oftentimes you're right. Creative people undervalue themselves and underprice their products or the services that they provide, because it does come easy. And so we think, oh, well, then other people, if it comes easy, I should give it away, or I should have it be what we might consider affordable. And so a great tip to remember. Now, you said kind of culture being very vibrant and colorful, and growing up in a military family, I'm curious, like, what was your earliest memory of being creative?
I think it is sitting in front of, well, actually I take it back. It's not the Bob Ross. I remember being very young, and my mom used to have she used to do cross stitching. And I remember sitting in bed with her, and I had my own little cross stitch thing and she had one of hers, and I just remember sewing with her and creating our own whatever the artwork design was. And like that's one of the earliest things that I probably remember actively creating. But my mom is an art, like my mom, her brother and her sister are all artistic in their own ways. Like my mom is really good with landscapes, my aunt is really good at painting people, and then my uncle was really good with like cartoons. And so they were always drawing and painting and things like that. And so my mom really encouraged that type of stuff. So even I remember even being in like the first or second grade, and you have to, make the little dioramas of a book you read. And mine was never like looked like it was done by a first grader, because it was me and my mom, and she's drawing things, and it's the most elaborate diorama that there is.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I love hearing those memories of how creativity showed up in early life, and then how those influences kind of continue on in adult life, and how you incorporate some of them. And it sounds like you absolutely do, in the design and the color and all of those pieces.
Yeah, like even now my mom with my son will, like, she's teaching him how to paint, and he's 5, and she makes pictures with him and teaches him different painting techniques, and we have all of his artwork all around the house on these little canvases that he does. And I'm the one, we get like these boxes every month that are STEM related, and some of them are like painting and art and science and stuff. I'm the one who sits and I do all of that stuff with him. So I'm trying to infuse that in him.
Yeah,
too.
keep passing it on, making sure there's both sides are well honed. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah. You strike me as someone who has or who's easily inspired by a lot of things. But in your life today, who or what inspires you?
I think generally just the world in general is very inspiring to me. I feel like that's kind of a cop out, but like it's very easy for me, especially like today I went running and to just like appreciate like, oh, like it's really nice today and it was hot and like it's breezy and like I tend to notice a lot of things like that, or like when flowers start to bloom. Like I took a picture that I meant to send to my husband. We had like a blue jay that was sitting on our deck today, and it was like the most vibrant blue I've ever seen on a bird. And so it's like little things like that I tend to notice and kind of pick up on. And so I think it's, for me, it's relatively easy to kind of just look at what's around me and find like beauty in that, and be inspired to kind of create other things out of that.
Nice. Yeah, kind of those everyday creative pieces that you're pulling from to.
Yeah, I mean, the world in general is such a beautiful place that we often overlook.
Yeah, we do. I know. I went on a walk the other day and took little videos of all these things that I saw. Little kids had made like a little diorama in a little cage, and someone had painted on the sidewalk. And
Yeah, I also think something that does, a person that inspires me coincidentally probably is my son, in the way that I try to imagine how he must see the world as a 5-year old, and how like there's so many things that are just new to him and exciting. And we took him to the movies for the first time this past weekend, and how like different of an experience that must have been to like walk into a movie theater and to see this big screen and the popcorn. And so like I try to remind myself of like what it must be like to experience the world that way, because I think not only is it inspiring like in a creative way, but just in generally like life way. Like if we approach the world like everything is just fresh and new and exciting, it just makes it a lot more fun.
oh my gosh, it totally does. And like 5-year-olds are the best when it comes to creativity and experiencing it and expressing it and sharing it. So
Yeah.
that's great. You've got like a live-in creative.
They have vivid imaginations, so
You are not kidding. Yes, they do. Yeah, absolutely. Now, with working in your Strategy by Sasha and also your Boundless Audio Podcast Network, I imagine you kind of come up with or meet people who don't consider themselves to be creative. How would you encourage others who may not feel quote unquote creative to find creativity in their life?
I for that it's about finding something that is inspiring to them. So if that means going for a walk, or like if you are in a place where you can take an afternoon and go to a museum or go to a garden or something like that, and pay attention to what kind of like makes you excited with what you're looking at,
Mhm.
and then use that to go back to whatever you're doing. I think people mistake being creative with like artistic endeavors, but that's not necessarily true. You can be creative in the way that you think of new processes, like if it to, make your business more efficient, or thinking of a way to make something better for someone else. Like it doesn't have to be necessarily artistic, but maybe if you notice outside, you happen to pay attention to how something is working, and that gives you an idea to, oh, maybe I can do this in my business and make this work better this way. Or I have a client that, I can do a process and this will work for them. Like that's still being creative. It's about thinking differently than what we are used to. It's not necessarily like just the making things pretty. It's also making things better or work better or be easier for other people.
Yeah, that problem solving
Exactly.
aspect of it. No, I love such a great reminder that we can find creativity in the things that we are good at and we do that aren't necessarily performing or, the quote unquote creative arts.
Yeah,
And
I mean, a really good example of that I'm sure most people wouldn't think is creative, and I'm pretty sure they probably don't think it's creative, but like the people who came up with Google,
yeah,
like that was something that was never done before, never seen before. It's not a traditionally creative aspect, but these people were able to look at code in a certain way and write it in a certain way and create this amazing thing that now essentially runs the world. But
Yeah.
like that is an aspect of creativity. It's just done with a different medium, with a whole bunch of ones and zeros and coding versus like a paintbrush and pretty
Right.
stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so important to remember that creativity can be found in anything and
Yeah.
literally everything we do. So
Yep.
thanks for that reminder. It has been such a treat to chat with you. I just have one last question. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
Oh, that makes me happy. I
Ah,
I I think like I said, like creativity for me is a very colorful thing. And I find the most joy in being in atmospheres probably that are on beaches, but that are very colorful, that are loud, that are vibrant, and it just brings me a lot of joy. And so for me, that's what my creativity feels like. It's just is something that makes me happy.
I love it. And I can totally picture the beach and the sound and the colors and all of that. And it makes you smile thinking about it. So thank you for that. And thank you so much for sharing all of your stories and the tips and tools that you have today. If people want to learn more about the things that you do, how could they go about doing that?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Strategy by Sasha. My website is Strategy by Sasha. My podcast network is Boundless Audio Podcast Network.com. And it's the same on Instagram. I think on Instagram it's actually Boundless Audio Network. But yeah, that's where you can find me at. And you can, if you want to learn more about how I can help in your business, if you have a podcast and you want to learn you can get it promoted, that's where you can find me on both ends.
Awesome. I will put that in show notes so people have easy access. And thank you again for taking the time to chat with me. It has been a real treat.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.